Hello and welcome to episode 21 of the podcast. Today I'm talking to Jacqui Clarke. Jacqui is the author of the book Stop Worrying About Money. Jacqui is a trusted advisor, a board member, an executor, and a veteran business executive. As a personal wealth and money management expert with over 3 decades of experience, Jacqui has worked for 25 years at Deloitte and PwC, helping high net worth families, individuals, and business owners to build, manage, and preserve their wealth. So her message is simple: with careful planning and effort, you can manage your money so it doesn't manage you. So today on the podcast with Jacqui, we are talking about her book, Stop Worrying About Money, and some of the concepts that are in her book. And one topic that I do want to make mention about, as this is a podcast mainly about business finances, is that looking after your personal finances before your business finances is really important. So often, if you're not looking after your personal finances or not feeling in control of them, then you will bring those habits into your business finance management. And you also won't feel like you have money confidence, because you're going to feel a bit out of whack if you're not managing your personal finances well and you're not feeling good about that. And so we touch on that today, as well as some other topics that are in the book. So let's get started talking to Jacqui.
You're listening to Her Money, Her Business, a podcast for women starting or growing their own business. And it features episodes about knowing your finances, improving your money confidence, and growing a profitable business that's built to last. If you wish you were good with money, want to feel more confident managing your money, or want to struggle less while making money, then you're in the right place. I'm your host, Sonia Belzarolo, business financials coach, bookkeeper, and champion for women who want to be the master of their own financials. So let's get started. Hi, Jacqui. Thanks for joining the Her Money, Her Business podcast. How are you?
I'm great, and I'm really pleased to be here. Thanks, Sonia.
Yeah, no problem at all. Well, we've heard a little bit about you already in the intro of the podcast, your official bio.
Yes.
But why don't you tell us a bit more about you and what brought you to today and here talking about your book?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, probably the bits that aren't covered in the bio is, if you look at my career, 30 years in professional services, so being an advisor to businesses and high net worth individuals, and most of those 30 years in the big four accounting firms. And in 2019, I decided to step out from that role, which was a big deal. I had a very good role, executive role in the business there. And there was some change around leadership, which for some period of time hadn't seemed right to me after being there for so long. I'd been with Deloitte for 20 years leading up to that decision. And so I stepped out of that role. It was a big deal to do it. But I think you have to get to a point where you've got to back yourself. And I did have someone mentoring me who was the former CEO of Deloitte. So that was kind of helpful, because he also sort of acknowledged that a lot of people feel like they're only as good as that brand. So it was a really, big challenge to consider leaving. Anyway, I did that and quite quickly engaged with some clients in the context of developing their family board, which was the only role I could do at the time. And then sort of over the process of COVID, and I wish I'd written my book during COVID, but it wasn't even on my radar, actually. But I think coming out of the COVID period, I started to think about my legacy. So what that might look like. I think one of the things that had frustrated me in some respects was that I wasn't able to help more people. Like, there's only just a limit to what you can do. And so I had a coach at that time, and I was working with my business coach essentially to say, what's the world all about? And I said to her, look, I've got all this money wisdom, and we both sort of agreed I had an awful lot to share. So I thought, okay, I didn't want to sound like a cliche, but actually I think I need to put this into a book. And so I started that journey in December 21. Yeah. It's amazing how long it takes, actually, from sort of writing a book to then seeking a publishing arrangement, which was important to me. Everyone does differently. And and the book was born and obviously hit the shelves just a few months ago. So pretty exciting journey. So it was just part of the journey for me, really, but it really capture the money wisdom and sort of enable others, as many as possible.
With your new book, obviously it's out now, so we'll have all the links in the show notes and things.
Yeah.
But reading through, I mentioned to you before we started recording that I'd just finished reading it on the weekend and really enjoyed it. And what I loved about it most was the case studies and the stories in there, because they really help to cement the information. Yeah.
Yes.
Do you have a favorite story that you like to retell?
Oh, look, I think to me, probably one of the most significant ones is the turnaround story. And you might remember, I can't remember the name of the character, but I remember the story very well. But somebody who I have known for a really long time, had gone on that journey. If you think almost from the front of the book right through, if you think about getting a house in order, identify things like financial goals, all those things, but really sort of cruised along in life, having good jobs and spending their money as they earned it, probably suffered massively from expense creep.
Yes.
And had been through a divorce, raising kids, all those life stages. And then at some point was literally reading the paper. And I think it was the Australian at the time, and read that story about the famous Australian chef whose wife was essentially homeless or destitute. And I think that was a really significant aha moment. And that was really that time when she said, I have to make a change. Yeah. And she did. And I think it was a financial goal setting change. It was saying, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I need to, maybe consider how I can save some money to buy myself a place. And I'm observing that turnaround story now, where she bought a home. So this is over sort of 10 or 13 to 14 year period of time, did eventually save for a deposit, did buy a home, did stop renting, has now bought an investment property. So, you can kind of see over a period of time. And this is somebody who's now in their 50s or early 50s who's actually really made. So I think what I say is you can always come back from your mistakes.
Yes.
And we all make them. Some of them are about money. Obviously, lots of mistakes aren't. But sometimes I find with decisions, there's an underlying money story, how you've made certain choices. And it's important that we connect with that, recognise it, and sort of move forward from it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Because I think people, Sonia, sometimes do feel a bit defeated. I can only earn this much. It's costing this much to pay my mortgage or my rent. Food costs this much. I can't get out of this sort of spiral, or the reverse is the treadmill, which is you're so stuck on it. But I think you really need to connect with what matters to you and decide, do I need this amount of income forever? So what do I need to change in my day-to-day living where I can actually rein some of those costs in, even take the sacrifice now, but so that you have more options.
Absolutely, yeah. And I know, raising kids and things, we're going through that stage of the curiosity of money and talking about, because I work from home, so they're curious about, well, how do you make money? Like, well, what's this all about? How does this work? And having these discussions, there's a lot, it really worries me that there's so much instant gratification that finding ways to talk to kids and educate them, because that this is the groundwork for the future, and all these, these things that we see happening in particular with women and what we talk about, women in business. There's so much to think about, from an early age right through to, our own ages, and what's happening out there with money, and, how to make informed decisions, and how to not get stuck in this instant gratification, which I think, is a definite epidemic, if you like.
Yeah, look, you raise a good point. And I think that, you would have loved the Kids and Money chapter. And that was probably the biggest chapter in the book right towards the end. But I think when I got into writing it, and having raised, we've got 18 to 25-year-old sons, 5 of them. So we've kind of been on a pretty significant money journey with them. I love that your kids are asking the questions.
Yeah.
I think that's the first point. The other thing that we've been trying to do is normalize money conversations, because to that money story, a lot of people have grown up without talking about money. There's nothing wrong with that, but the difficulty is, how do you start to learn about it, and how do you rationalize the choices made in life? Because a lot of them tie back to money: where you live, how you live, what you eat, if you eat out, if you don't, if you save things, if you don't, if you're a complete spendthrift. Sort of comes from that. So I think actually having the conversation with kids is really valuable. And instant gratification, like, let's face it, in our world, things are a lot more readily accessible now than they ever used to be. And I think about the things I can buy on Amazon. There's not much I can't anymore.
That's right.
To my door without any fuss. So it's quite, there's almost a disconnect in the bit where you go to work and you earn their money and then you spend. I think there's a great opportunity with kids to help them defer that gratification by thinking about, again, like a financial goal of some kind or something that they might like to achieve, rather than buying the PlayStation or buying a tennis racket or whatever it might be, is something that might be more significant, or an investment that they might like to make where you can actually help support them. And that might make contributing to that, but that helps with that gratification. If you get to a certain savings goal, I might increase that for you. But I think all of it helps maybe stretch out that journey, if you like, from the kids. I remember when the kids were little, if you gave them money for helping out with something, and they'd be up the street spending it on chocolate bars and chips before it even hit their pocket.
That's exactly right. Yes, they've got to get rid of it. It's burning a hole in their pocket, as we say.
I think that happens to us as well. The most common thing that we all suffer from is expense creep. Yes. And naturally, if you've got a bonus or a tax refund or whatever it might be, it's often spent or committed before you've even received it. There's an opportunity there to say, okay, do I pay down the mortgage, or do I put school fees or rent aside? Like, what are the things what's the low-hanging fruit for you where that can actually be dedicated to something more meaningful, other than just another holiday to Fiji or whatever it might be that people are spending money on.
And obviously this podcast is called Her Money, Her Business. So it really is focused on women in business. And you've got a chapter in there, chapter 11, that talks about focusing on business.
Yes.
So in your experience in the businesses that you've worked with, what do you see as some of the main challenges or blocks that women in particular have when they first start businesses?
Well, the number one thing is around having the confidence to back yourself. I actually think that's the number one thing.
Yeah.
And then second to that, I talk a lot about the personal finance village, so having people around you. I think what women are good at is recognizing perhaps where their strengths lie and where their development needs lie, and working out who you can have in that village to support you. So I think we have a strength in that. We need to make sure that we invest in building our relationships, which we're good at, again, but people who are supporting us where we might have a gap, skill gap of some kind, or just a focus gap. You might be really good at focusing. For example, you might be a creative. You might be very good or focused on design and have brilliant ideas, but you may be very bad at keeping an eye on cash flow. And cash flow, I can't go anywhere without talking about cash being king. And what I mean by that is that people need to have a very clear eye on cash, and when it's coming into the business, and naturally with businesses when they grow, is just not getting too far ahead of yourself without making sure that you are actually making a profit in your business. And there's a period of time where you can break even for, but I think realistically that 12 to 18 month period is about where you've got to call it.
Yeah.
But don't hang on too long either. Like, people say, this is a fail, I need to get out. But quickly and cheaply is a motto I think that people follow quite typically if they've got a bit of an innovation culture. But also, I think, important for you as a business owner. So there are a couple of things sort of have those top 10 almost on, and they're probably incredibly helpful. The other thing is the business plan is a really interesting aspect. I think strategically it's of great value to all of us to sit back and think, what do we want this business to look like in, sort of that 18-month window, then 3 years, 5 years, and so on. That's really important, because in the absence of doing that planning, if you try and step back to the here and now, you will miss focus if you don't actually have a bit of a plan. So I think that's quite genuine. And I'm not talking about any wild, 35
page, yes.
2 pages that you actually stick it up on your wall. These are the business goals for the next 12 to 18 months. These are the business goals for 3 years, so that you actually come back to those. You can reset them, you can change them, but actually they're incredibly important. And if you're off track, you've got to make the decision then, what does getting back on track look like for me? And then while I'm thinking about that we need to look after ourselves. So I think it's not uncommon for women to be so focused on the business that they forget about how to take care of themselves. And things like burnout and just complete distraction, I think, from the business. You've got to be careful to really balance things up, and so not killing yourself in the process.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yes, I think you've touched on the real common things that I see a lot for women in the first few years of their business is that cash flow issue and understanding their money and really keeping a close eye on what's going on and making decisions quickly if things are going the wrong way. And definitely that burnout is a problem. Women are either coming into these businesses that we're creating, and there's more women than ever starting businesses, particularly, coming out of COVID. There's statistics show that there's so many more women starting businesses. And coming into it, we're bringing these, ideas of doing everything for everyone, and we're putting that into our businesses as well. Or if we've come from a corporate career, I did that. I came from a corporate career of 20 plus years and then started my business. And the first few years of my business, I had young children as well, but I was just burning myself out because I was trying to do everything and keeping up with how my mindset was used to working in a corporate career. And then trying to bring that into your own business. There's so many things that you sort of need to keep an eye out for around that burnout side of things, definitely.
I think you have to be fair on what expectations you're setting for yourself.
Yes.
And there's lots of ways you can transition into a business as well. If you've come from the corporate career like you and I, it's not always going to be plain sailing, finish one day, start the next day. Some people might kick off with a side hustle, so have their day job, which does pay the rent or the mortgage, and then eventually scale their side hustle to a point where they can see it sort of standing on its own 2 feet. It's not always that easy. And I find that until you've got the 100% focus, it's really difficult to turn that profit.
Yeah.
But it is important to be kind to yourself in that process, and also in terms of the expectations you've got from the business, you want to be fair about that as well, reasonable about that as well. But I think it's important that we create buffers too. So if this is a journey for you, you want to create buffers financially before you take that journey, and give yourself that window to say, during this period of time, I'm okay if I don't make a profit from this business, and then be prepared to say, okay, this hasn't worked, I need to now change tack. Change is this constant thing. It's the whitewater rafting thing. When you leave, and particularly if you're leaving a corporate role, there's a lot of frameworks around you. They all go out the door when you start your own business.
That's right.
And so you have to be used to change, or pivoting, as we talk about in businesses, because sometimes whether it's the type of customer, the structure of the product you're selling or the service you're selling, it needs to be adapted. You've got to be prepared to do that. Being nimble is critical.
Yes, that's right. And not sort of hanging on just because you've put all this time and effort into it. You've got to, like you say, move quickly if things are going in the wrong direction, and as cheaply as possible. Yes, that's right. Yeah, and I definitely, the concept of this whole podcast as well, and what I do around business financials, is helping people really know that they've got the data and everything they need in their business. And if they understand that, then things like pivoting and realizing that this particular product or service is not working, doesn't mean it's the end of the road. It just means that you can pivot and change and focus on the things that are working to amp them up.
Yeah, look, there's no doubt about that. And I think people get caught up in or hung on to particular issues around what they've developed. Plus, it could be, it's like the baby thing. This is my baby.
Yes.
I've got to make this work. No, you don't. If it's not working, if it's not generating a positive cash flow, you don't need to throw yourself in the process. But be prepared to let go.
Yes, that's right. Yes, know when to stop.
And I think one of the other things that I see a lot is issues in particular the first 2 to 3 years, so not necessarily at startup point for women, is the ability to make decisions around risk. So when to invest in your business and when to grow. So you've got something that you've proven and it's working. And I think in general, our society in Australia is also, compared to the rest of the world, a bit of risk averse. And, what would your advice be around women who are in that sort of stage where they're ready to probably grow a bit, but they need to invest something into that? What are your thoughts around that?
Well, I mean, I've probably been relatively consistent saying you've got to back yourself.
Yes.
I think that the other thing that's really important is doing your research. People can get caught up or be told things, and I think that's what they need to do. But actually, it's really important that you do your own research and you understand what the potential risk might be, what the potential upside might be, and make a decision then to back yourself. I believe that's what it's all about. And half of it's that backing yourself and that confidence, half of it, if not more.
Yes.
And then how do you invest further in developing your business or your ideas? It's just constant. And perhaps that's one thing that nobody ever tells you in the school of business. This is a constant thing. Like I say, be prepared, change is constant. So that's something else that I would suggest needs to be thought about. Maybe the other thing, Sonia, is a plan B, backing yourself, but being prepared with an alternative plan. Now, that's not always that easy to see, but I think this goes to the research as well, and your preparedness around the type of business that you're in is actually recognising that having a plan B is quite valuable and can give you that level of comfort or confidence to take the risk that you're about to take.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. The research part of it is really key, because if you've done the research and you can see, what could go wrong, but also what could go so right, then you're walking in with open eyes and you're prepared, give it, the best you possibly can. So like you say, back yourself, and then you go from there and see what happens. I mean, everything is a risk in business. If we had the rule book to say this is definitely going to work, then everyone would be doing it.
You'd be doing it. Yeah, and that's true. Maybe one of the other things is that, and a lot of the area that I have worked in is asset protection. So it's critical that you understand that you have the right business structure and that your assets are separate from that business structure. Or if they're not, how do you protect those assets? So that might be with a huge debt with the bank. That helps bring the value of assets down. It might be a different structure. It might be a company that you're operating out of rather than being a sole trader. Partnerships come with their own set of risks, pretty significant ones, because partners are jointly and severally liable for the actions that their partners undertake. So understanding the structure that you've got, and again, having advice. So we've talked about having that personal finance village, like who's in your village? Have you got a business coach? Have you got an accountant? Do you have a lawyer? They're the types of people I'm thinking about. They could be close family friends, but my main focus there is ensuring that they've got the right credentials to be advising you, not just good at talking about it. Yeah, being sure that you are protecting the assets that you've already created or built. And a lot of people, perhaps certainly in the cohort of people listening to your podcast, have probably already established some wealth themselves. So our job is to make sure that they protect that. And then go into the business. I think that's really important.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a great section in your book that outlines those the different areas or the structures of business you can have, and it's very easy to read. I think sometimes that going particularly from sole trader to that step up and creating a company is a question a lot of women have around, when should I do that? Should I do it at all? What's the benefits, etc. And I think it's a bit of a sort of a mystery to some people. So I think your book really explains that really well.
The other thing too is what I see a lot is people making money but not setting money aside for tax.
Oh, absolutely.
Compliance.
So I
see people getting caught out with that all the time, and smart people. I'm not suggesting that this is people just haven't done their research, but people, every dollar that comes into the bank, you should put at least 30% of that aside, accessible for anything the business needs. Put that money aside, because invariably people aren't able to pay their BAS. They aren't able to pay their staff wages. They probably aren't able to pay the superannuation. All these things will cost you dearly.
Yes.
And I mean, we talked about cash flow right at the start. Naturally, keeping an eye on that's important. But most people should have a separate bank account for tax. And I say put 30% aside. It's bound to be right. You might be creating a tiny buffer, maybe not. But yeah, putting that money aside to success every dollar. Because what happens is because of that time lag, naturally, especially if you're starting out, a big time lag before you actually pay your first tax bill. And you might be thinking, honky dory, look at all this gross income, especially if you're used to being an executive or a job where you're getting your tax taken out of your pay. Fantastic. Oh, we need to do that. We need to do that. And all of a sudden tax bill comes and you're like, hang on. So I've either got to work harder to pay that, and it sets you back, 18 or 2 months into your 2 years into your new business. But the reality is, if you put you put the 30 cents in every dollar aside today, long way ahead.
Yes, that's definitely a big one that I see happening all the time for people, is that first 2 years or so. It really trips people up, that delayed first requirement around compliance.
It's business. I mean, business value 101. It's the joy of the gross income. It actually messes with your head, right?
It does.
Net income. That you need to be really sure to capture that.
Absolutely. And it does trip people up, particularly people who've come from jobs, like you say, where someone else does that for you. So what you get in your bank account is what you're keeping. Yes, it's a tricky one. It's definitely something people need to focus on for sure. So last question for you. In Australia, there's something like, I think you said in your book, the stats around 2.5 million small businesses in Australia. But you also mentioned that around 60% of those won't survive past 5 years. From your experience, what are the top reasons people are not continuing in their businesses? I know we've probably talked about some of them, but what are you seeing, and what do you really want people to avoid so that they're not part of that statistic when they're starting a business?
I mean, it's amazing how long people will hang on too. So if you go back to those basic things that we talked about, like focusing on cash flow, I mean, most people I work with tend to miss that. So it's sort of the most fundamental thing. Sure, if people are setting up an accounting firm, they might be good on the cash flow, but most other businesses, it's secondary to the skill set that you're bringing to the table. So you sort of go back to the start. I think cash is number one. Having the right people around you, getting advice at the start of the journey, setting a plan is essential. Making or being prepared to change or shift or to pivot, as we've talked about. You see lots of businesses where they focus so heavily and firmly on a particular path that the rigidity of that means they're not moving. And it's like keeping up with customer trends. I mean, look how they're shifting. Look at, I heard an interesting statistic the other day. Facebook is still the tool that most Australians, they've got the highest use, for example, but businesses shifted a lot to, say, Instagram. But the reality is the volume of people looking at Facebook in Australia is still higher, but businesses have pivoted to Instagram. So I prefer Instagram to Facebook myself. So that's where I'm hanging out. But clearly there's still a large group of Aussies who are still on Facebook, for example. So these types of things. So you might pivot in your business, but the reality is you still need to maintain that original course around, say, your Facebook presence. So it's just keeping up with change. And marketing is a really tricky aspect of businesses, I think, as well. You need a really clear program on your marketing, whatever that might be. Most people run some type of matrix model. I think you just need to stay on it all the time. You can't set and forget in business.
That's right. So if people don't know you're there, then you're not selling anything.
No, and look, it's easy to be reluctant when you've started off and you've put all your energy into it and things are working. That's great. The reality is that will only be for a period of time, and then you need to sort of kickstart, reboot, change direction.
And I did say that was a final question, but I do have one more for you. I mean, a lot of your book
That's
also
okay.
is a lot of your book is also focused around personal finances. When I first started this podcast in series one, that the very first episode was personal finances before business finances, because I really do believe that if people are not getting control of their personal finances, then they'll bring those habits into their business. And so I always send people back to, their personal finances first and make sure that they're on top of that. And your book does focus a lot on that, and there's a lot of great stuff in there. So what would your biggest tip be for people to focus on their personal finance?
I love that question, Sonia. That's like kind of here it is on a silver plate. But the number one thing is getting your house in order. And when I say that, what I mean is making sure that you understand what it costs to run your household. And you will have seen me talk about the open your front door costs. So critical that people know that stuff, because actually that's where the flex is with the business. Recognize those things, because they can be an anchor or a dead weight on you.
Yes.
If you're really clear about if you know what it costs to open the front door at home, are you right size for where you want to be in life, or do you need to change that? Then recognizing what your total baseline costs are of living, which is all the discretionary spending, the Uber Eats, eating out, the entertainment, the holidays, travel, you name it. Actually recognizing what all of that is, that sets the framework for how successful you'll be in business. Because if you take that same level of responsibility or accountability across to your business, then it's going to be a win-win. But the first flex point is, what do we need at home, or what is it costing us? What do we need to shift or change so that then I can, enjoy this business journey? So I really love the question. And what goes with getting your house in order is everything, like getting your wills done. That's something that business owners sometimes miss. Again, being focused on the business, but that's incredibly important, is to get those things. It's like, how can you reduce risks or create greater financial security for yourself and your family? It's knowing how much it costs to open the front door at home and checking in to say, is this right? Is this where we want to live? Does this all make sense? But then things like setting a financial goal as well, which might mean I've got to save X dollars in order to springboard off in my business, or you might need to save more so that then you can make particular changes of direction in your business to then decide, okay, how do we sort of create this security for our family so that it enables me to have this greater flexibility with the type of work I'm choosing to do.
Yeah, no, that's great. And in what I do, I talk a lot about the keep the doors open cost, which is your business minimums. So it's basically the same thing, but for your house. I love that.
And that's why I'm saying, essentially, if you get it right at home, it's a lot easier to take that discipline over to the business. It's a great start.
Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. It's great talking about your new book. So as I mentioned earlier, we will have all of your socials, your website, your book links, etc., in the show notes for anyone to go and have a look at. And I definitely recommend grabbing a copy of your book. It's great. And I think you've actually got a free chapter that people can download as well, haven't you? There's a link in there.
Directly off the website. So by all means, download that. I think that's really helpful for everyone.
Any final thoughts or messages for our listeners before we finish up today's episode?
Oh, look, I think the other thing, Sonia, which we maybe haven't talked about, a bit of a final message, is taking responsibility around money in your household. One of the things that women particularly do is delegate this a lot. And you might be focused on your business, but not necessarily focus on the home thing. And what I would just like to encourage people to do, and particularly women, is to ensure that they take responsibility. Don't delegate the numbers stuff at home to someone else. We've got a responsibility to build our financial literacy. If you don't do it, you'll find it deteriorates, and it's completely unhelpful in a business context if your financial literacy is low. So all I do, what I suggest is encouraging people to take responsibility. And if you've delegated bill paying to somebody, fine, but make sure you're understanding what those costs are of opening the front door.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. That's a great note to end on. Well, thank you very much for being here today, Jacqui.
Thanks, Sonia. I really enjoyed it. Appreciate it.
Excellent. Thanks, Jacqui. This episode was brought to you by my mini course, Money In, Money Out. Head over to our website, blossomingbusiness.com.au, for this episode's show notes found under podcasts. And if you're interested, jump on the Money In, Money Out waitlist to find out when it's next available. You've been listening to the Her Money, Her Business podcast with me, Sonia Belzarolo. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review over on iTunes. It really does help to get the podcast out to more people. And of course, I love hearing your feedback. Thanks for listening. And here's to knowing your finances and growing your business. It's your money, your business.